Brian Kelly said this.
He is going to be so committed to taking care of himself that you're going to have to worry about size or he doesn't weigh enough. Lamar's done a pretty good job with his size. I think Mahomes, I wouldn't consider him a giant because he's going to get the ball out to the playmakers and make plays for Washington.
For Washington. Talking about his quarterback, Jaden Daniels, for Washington. Think of the guys that have been linked to the Washington Commanders, and none of it has come out of Washington itself. Mm-hmm. We've had Drake May.
Yep.
We now have Brian Kelly saying for Washington at the end of his, that's where Jaden Daniels is going to be a dude. Mm-hmm. And then we heard J.J. McCarthy at number 2. Just this week, all 3 of those guys have been linked to the Washington Commanders, but we have not heard a single word out of Washington, whether it's Dan Quinn or it is
pumping that propaganda mill.
Josh Harris, their new owner. Was Adams their GM? Is Josh Adams the guy that they brought in from San Francisco to be their GM? They haven't said boo about the direction that they want to go in. It's all been speculation on the outside. And when you think of sitting at number 2, and you kind of hold the keys to the rest of the draft.
Yes, all the decision trees that follow after that, because one is one.
You are essentially the number 1 pick now, because we know where Caleb Williams is going at number 1. He's going to the Chicago Bears. From there, it seems like the Commanders are kind of in this, who do we love, who do we not love? And this is where it can be enticing for the Commanders is if any other team is in love with any of these 3 quarterbacks that they have named, they now have leverage to say, all right, give us a haul and we can improve our roster exponentially. If it's the Vikings that absolutely love J.J. McCarthy, and McCarthy's name was linked to the Commanders this week, if it is the Patriots that are sitting there at number 3 and going,
they want their pick of quarterback.
We want I don't know if it's McCarthy, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels. If they love either one of those guys, they've both been linked to Washington. It becomes now hey, name your price, sweeten the pot for us, because no matter what, they could sit there and they could trade back if it's New England just wants to jump up and get Jaden Daniels or Drake May. They can kind of dangle that carrot over and say, if you really love that guy, we have a little bit of leverage here.
It's going to be interesting to see kind of how this...
I can't believe I'm saying this about the Commanders, by the way.
Well, I mean, you've got new ownership. You've got new general manager. You've got a new coach. You've got everybody there that has removed the stench of Dan Snyder on them. Whether or not it works, that's still up for debate, but you still at least have to be mildly optimistic as opposed to the past where you knew they were going to screw it up. That's that's the bar you're stepping over right now. Like the roof is the ceiling. You know what I mean? Like it's just stepping over it is not that hard right now. It's
no longer overpaying for guys that don't make sense on a roster with a ton of holes.
Yeah. So if I'm that, look, I know what we see from owners every single time is the same thing. Spend money on team. I want to make impact splash, whether it's football, baseball, basketball. It's the same thing. Go get me high-price free agent. Go get me big draft. Go get me whatever this is. They're going to want something to put butts in seats.
Yep.
That's just the reality of the business. And what sells more hope than a young quarterback? Nothing. Nothing in the NFL sells more hope than a young quarterback. Now, it can be extinguished very quickly if they are not good, or the rest of your team is terrible. But I think if you're the Commanders here, if they are actually willing to trade back, it shows. Remember during the hiring process, was it Ben Johnson was like, I don't really want to go to Washington. They're basketball guys that think they know too much, and that made me go, this is going to be bad. But if that got out and they were willing to accept that criticism of like, hey, we don't know everything. Maybe let's be smarter about this.
Yeah.
Which, again, billionaires typically don't say that. They say, you're an idiot. We know more than you. That's how we got where we are. As opposed to, probably nepotism. But the way that all ends up shaking out is, are they willing enough and smart enough to accept that?
Yeah.
And then make the correct decisions beyond that. I've said this over and over again. I am not willing to tie myself to J.J. McCarthy. I don't know if I'm willing to do it for Daniels or May. But if you are, and you're willing to move back for one of them, and you can get more assets for a team and help kickstart the rebuild and maintain a structure that makes sense, I think that's the more important and prudent thing for the organization. But I think that so much of that right now is I'll believe it when I see it.
I think one thing that it's Adam Peters is the GM.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in from San Francisco. But if this is the case and those basketball guys are letting Peters make football decisions, you think of the tree that Adam Peters is coming from, where San Francisco's done a really good job in the draft. They've done a really good job of keeping talent, developing talent. If you are not in love with whether it be Daniels, May, or McCarthy, with what we talked about yesterday, in where league executives and people within the NFL are looking at that quarterback position, if you're not in love with either one of Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or I guess we could throw J.J. McCarthy in there too, then trading back, you can still get a quarterback in and be able to cut bait on him. If you don't, the big risk in that is if the guy that you trade back, if he pops, then that's a different conversation, and then you have egg on your face.
Yeah, but would you rather that be the conversation as opposed to trying to do the right thing and structurally build up your team, or are you okay with being called cowards because you didn't take the risk?
Yeah, but if you don't take that risk and you generate a couple more assets, whether it be whatever first round pick you're getting from the team that's trading up, and then a third or a fourth round pick, if you hit on those draft picks later in the draft, and you still are in a position where, hey, we might be looking for our quarterback in the future, it kind of makes sense. And look, I think there is validity to what Brian Kelly said, because who's the backup in Washington right now? Marcus Mariota. They just got Marcus Mariota, a mobile quarterback who is a guy, if you're talking about what you're tailoring your offense towards.
And your backup usually you tailor towards, or you go get a backup that's tailored towards the offense
because
you want to run.
Don't want a stylistic shift.
No.
And when your backup has to come in.
But hey, remember,
Jaden Daniels kind of fits that mold.
J.J. McCarthy is an athlete.
J.J. McCarthy is an athlete.
Remember.
J.J. McCarthy is an athlete.
So is Drake May.
People forget. J.J. McCarthy, athlete.
No, there's nobody that's a fan of Michigan that will let you forget. Trust me.